Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Sandra D, where we dive deeply and help you wake up to the essence of what it means to live a real, authentic, affluent life. Beyond the balance sheets, the bank accounts, the private jets, the political offices, into the realm of inner wealth and personal power. I'm Sandra D, your companion guide on this trajectory of truthful self-mastery as we celebrate your individuality and your sovereignty. Welcome, everyone, to another fantastic episode of Frankly Speaking with Sandra D. See the title, Frankly Speaking with Sandra D. Those of you who know me know I'm light and heavy all at once. I'm a mixed bag of fun and drama. So I try to scour the globe to find you the most entertaining and yet informative guests. And as you know, I am passionate about the topic of emotional intelligence. And you may have seen or heard the second episode on my podcast, which was dedicated to leading with emotional intelligence. And why I love this, because I've been admiring leaders close and far. Most of you know that my father was a military general. You can't go more leader than that. But at a young age, I was like, well, your style of leadership is not working for me, Daddy. There's something missing here. And what was missing was the emotional component, because I was an emotional child, very emotional. And those of you who remember me back then, I used to add a little bit of drinking to the conversation that made it a little bit more emotional. But I thought that's what was required to be a powerful leader. That said, so topic of emotional intelligence today for me reminds me of having that sense of command of yourself, which my lovely aunt used to tell me, command yourself first before you can command others. And I have found the ideal commander. I have today Commander Darlene Greene, who is a retired commander, Navy. So when I first started chatting with her, I said, can I call you G.I. Jane? But, I'm sure she'll tell you a few stories about being a G.I. Jane. But how fantastic is that? This topic is for men and women. And so Commander Greene has blessed me with the opportunity to have her come talk to us about what it was like for her to be a commander in the military, and a time where it wasn't sort of hip for women to go in those leadership roles. First of all, let me say welcome to the podcast. So nice. You and I have been just trying to coordinate. So I'm glad we were able to find place and time that was mutually convenient. But let's begin with, why don't you tell us, I know you come from a long line of military. My father wanted to send me to boot camp and start that legacy. And I was like, not happening. So tell me, how many generations back does your family go back to as far as serving in the military?
Yeah, so it's actually not as far back as you might think, because it starts really with my father, who served in the Air Force for 30 years. But then I was in the Navy for 20. I have 2 children myself, and I married into 2 children. All 4 of our children have served in the military or are serving currently. So the 2 boys, Marines, and then one of the Marines became a Navy pilot. The 2 girls, one daughter went to the Naval Academy and was in the Navy for 5 years, and another daughter went to the Air Force Academy and is still currently serving in the Air Force. So the legacy goes up a little and comes down a little bit. And I married into the military. What's kind of interesting, I'll tell you a funny story. We were at a restaurant that gave a military discount. Around the table were 14 of us. 12 of us had served in the military in the family. So it's up, it's down, but it has been a family legacy that I think part of that was because my father used to come home and he would say, I just can't believe they pay me to do this. He loved the Air Force so much. He flew, he took care of teams. He was such an amazing guide for me on leadership in general. And I know you have a different situation in some ways and some ways not. Like there was good demonstrations of leadership and not. But my dad was all about taking care of people and all about really putting your best foot forward. He taught me a lot about emotional intelligence. He was very, very strong. He actually had a master's in counseling. So he had a very
Amazing.
strong, very interesting background, right? So he was just super calm and wise and had so much character and integrity. The only problem with that, Sandra, is when you have a father that's that awesome, you don't know there are other kinds of men in the world. So I assumed wrongly that the other men that I would ultimately be with were just like my dad, right?
I know what you mean.
Yes, yes. And you talk a lot about narcissism, but not so fast. Like I actually ended up marrying two narcissists. So I had to learn the hard way. But I love the topic of emotional intelligence because I think it's more important than any other kind of intelligence, really.
So that's fantastic, and I stopped myself I didn't continue the introduction. So just so you know, the audience, a little bit more background about Commander Greene is she has an MBA and she also she commanded over 1,200 personnel. And she's still supporting the military across the country and after, over 26 years of service. And she's actually the co-author of a book which is called Become Empowered Echoes of Grace and Strength. And she co-authored this in 2024. So thank you. So I'm going to thank you. See, there's the book. Empowerment is definitely the way out of narcissism. So thank you so much for that. But also thank you for all the service that your family has committed to the United States of America. And I wanted to bring about, my father was an amazing father, amazing man. I was the baby. He had me on his lap every day. And I know there's some people who envy. I was inside the house. So people who are listening know what I'm talking about, that Haiti is a very complex place. So, it's very small. So my father was a greater than life personality in Haiti and having such discipline. I've never met one person that says anything in negative about my father. His service to his country was exemplary. I believe he was too good for that country, personally. And you can just come after me if you don't like what I say, because I think he was born wrong place, wrong time. Because some people are just too good for the circumstances that they exist in. But my father at home had a lot of stress. And so I hear you, it's a very different experience serving in the United States of America versus serving in Haiti, which was a dictatorship at the time when my father served. So all that stress would come home. But, I was daddy's girl. So we fought, we loved, and then fought again. So tell me more about what it was like growing up, as you heard just now, what it was like for me. Tell me about what it was like growing up with a military father.
Yeah. So, you were never disrespectful in this house. We would not even consider it. You never talked back. It was yes, sir, yes, ma'am. We would never lie. We could get in trouble and we could say what we did. But if we lied about it, man, I mean, all hell would break loose. So it was always about character and honesty. I learned things like I remember one time trying to get keys to the car to go to a high school football game. And I came in with this long preamble, and I had this was going on. And he said, stop, get out of my face until you have a succinct request, like go. And I was like, oh, so I left and I came back. I said, Dad, important football game. May I please borrow the car keys? Yes. So I learned even how to be concise, not beat around the bush and be direct in my requests, but also, also very respectful. So respect and even goals, direction. I remember wanting to go to a different football game and not being allowed in my junior year of high school until I had essentially written an essay to my dad on what I wanted to do when I grew up. I had no idea. And he said, well, you're not going until you write an essay on what it is that you want to do. So I remember going to the library and trying to figure out what would my job be? What is it? And I think I don't even remember what I chose at this point. I think it was, aviation, astronaut, aeronautical engineering, something. I remember whatever it was, it met the bill. I wrote the essay and I got to go to the football game. So it was very disciplined. It was very neat and orderly. And we had it was like he ran a tight ship, but it was full of love. My dad was a very loving father. My mom and dad had a beautiful marriage. Their marriage came first over the kids. You knew that going in. They spent time with each other. My dad was not the dad that was at every one of my sporting events or all of the things that I did. I had my own life. my parents, neither of them helped me with homework or any of my, that
Right.
was my responsibility. Having said that, I remember wanting a job in high school, and my dad said, absolutely not. You will have your lifetime to work, kid, and study and have fun and do sports right now. So that's kind of what it was like. It was
That's
really very blessed. I'm very grateful for my childhood. It was just beautiful.
absolutely. I mean, I have no regrets whatsoever. It made me who I am. Of course, through the growing pains, some of you may have listened to my first episode. Of course, I thought dysfunctional was normal and didn't know I was dysfunctional, but it was a learning curve. I had to grow up. That's one of the things that sometimes growing up with a very big personality, you kind of are like pigeonholed into playing a role because my family was a team. It was my father, my mother, who'd known each other since they were 16 years old and then married at 26. So anyone else who was lurking around, you were out of, because my dad was like, that's the one. She's the only one. And then there were us, the three of us, my siblings, my brother, my sister, and myself. And we were a team. We were a team. And when my parents were not exerting their leadership over how this team should represent Haiti in the United States, my siblings were telling me, I could see pictures when my brother's going like this, saying that too, that because your father was like the head, traditional head of household. And some people may reject those ideas, but I love those traditional ideas. And then you had your mother, and then you had you and your other siblings. You have siblings, correct?
I have one sister. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say my mom was a great leader through our childhood too. I think she sort of was more running the household altogether.
Correct.
My dad did the work thing. He came
Right.
back from work. My mom supported that. It was a very rare time when my mom would turn to my dad for discipline or anything for us.
Right.
But we kind of knew if my dad said something, that was the law. Like,
Right.
we just kind of knew the pecking order, even though
Right.
mom was running everything in the house and everything, right? It was just sort of understood.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that my father was the commander outside the house, but inside the house, my mother laid the law. She said, who called? She'd pick up the phone, and if she did not know you, you would not be getting to anybody in that household. So my mother I love her very much. She's still with us. And my father passed on in 1997.
Sorry.
But thank you. Great legacy that he left me. And that's why I am both my parents, the leaders I am. And I could not imagine my father being married to anyone else. My mother was just like that kind of woman, not very loud like me, quiet storm. She just didn't have to say much to get things done. As a matter of fact, they spoke, but not so much to us together as much as they coordinated behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And one of them, they never implemented at the same time. It was a very interesting strategy. And that is leadership, because if you have a team, you don't go chaotic and saying you have all these people talking at the same time. That's emotional intelligence, because you have to know, and we'll get to that part, but we're still talking about who you are. You still have to trust the team members. So right now we're talking about the team members in the family, because I do feel that is where you get your first training as to how to become a leader. Tell me more about some of what that was growing up. Did you go away to college? You went into the military, so you left home. Before then, what was the most instrumental piece that helped you become a leader within that family?
So I think it was really, being an older sister, right? You immediately are trying to guide someone with influence. You don't have any real authority over your sister, but you're trying to influence them by saying, don't do drugs, don't smoke, don't do this with boys, right? Really make sure that you are kind of walking that straight line and keeping them in a safe place. And I think sports too. My parents were very encouraging of me to try anything. I didn't have to be the best. And they loved me unconditionally. And they loved that I just loved sports, whatever that was. And so I did a lot of different things, learned a lot of leadership components from team sports. And I think that the combination of their unconditional love and support for me, and they're willing to let me fail. They were not today's snowplow parent where they're trying to guide and steer and keep you from falling. They fully embraced, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to brush yourself off. You're going to step back up and go forward again. And so I wasn't afraid of making mistakes. I wasn't afraid of trying new things. And I learned how important that really is. That's part of emotional intelligence, right? Is a growth mindset that, nobody's just born excellent at things. I guess there are some people that have gifts, and I will admit to that. But, it's really the hard work that's put behind things that make people really good at what they do. And I think that my parents taught that for me, and I learned that. And so I always grew up honestly thinking I could do anything. I really did. I grew up thinking there's nothing I can't do. My parents believe in me. I believe in me then. And so, what is it that I want to do? I will say that I grew up with a little bit of a feminist attitude around I'm as good as guys, but I wasn't getting that treatment even in school, right? There was there was sexual discrimination that
Of
far back.
course.
And so I was very competitive with boys around sports. Even in sixth grade, I remember having a arm wrestling contest and beating the strongest guy in the class
Oh my goodness.
in arm wrestling. So I think I just kind of their confidence and approach for me helped me to help my sister and teammates in sports and really then carried that forward.
That's fantastic. So I just wanted to ask, did your little sister listen to you? Because I had a big sister and she was just like, I've had enough of you.
She did. She tells me it was not easy being my little sister growing up because I did things very well as
She did too. Perfect girl.
captain of that, right? All of these things. But she did listen to me and she stayed out of drugs and she stayed out of the areas because she didn't want to disappoint me. Just like we didn't want to disappoint our parents. So I didn't know that I was making that influence at the time, but as an adult, we are very close and she has shared that with me since.
That's fantastic. Well, for me, my sister, we fought the whole time and I would just scream.
Oh, Sandra, we fought.
Oh
So
my goodness. People say, people who remember us back then, they're like, you hated each other. I was like, no, we loved each other. We loved each other. We were obsessed with each other. That's why we were always together. But being together meant we had to fight because it wasn't like a cozy flush. And I'm glad that I didn't grow up in like a pretense world, like people don't fight, because it made me a professional of conflict analysis and resolution. I acknowledged early on that just because you have conflict doesn't mean you cannot coexist. I was able to coexist in all the trauma and the drama. There was trauma there because I was called names and she was more of a tattletale than I was actually. She was always reporting back to the commander in chief. She said this and I was like, yeah, I said it. So thank you so much for that. So about how old were you when you left home to go into the military? And plus, let's go back. How was it for you when you knew the moment that was the step? Because you said your father told you to go write an essay about what you wanted to do. When was that instant?
probably my junior year is when I thought long and hard about going into the military services, because I think that's about when you start applying for scholarships and, Navy ROTC scholarships, Air Force ROTC scholarships. I don't know if I did. I think I may have done even Army. I'm not sure if I did or not. I ended up getting them all, but I chose the Navy scholarship because I wanted to go to University of Virginia. It was a very big break for me when I left at 18 to go to college. My parents, we were in Virginia at the time. I went to University of Virginia. My parents flew and moved to Alaska, and they were then in Alaska for 27 years. So my dad was vice commander of the Alaskan Air Command up there, so that was his final tour. And then he stayed there and was a guide as a fisherman, a hunter, and a pilot. So mom became a realtor and very successful there, and they just never came out. So it was a very long, when I went to college, it wasn't like in my backyard and I wasn't around home. I got home Christmases and summers really. So it was a very big change. I did have Navy ROTC. I really don't think I ever planned a career in the military. I planned on using it as a gateway to figure out what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I would spend, 4 or 5 years in the military and then I would have my education paid for and I would then have some work experience and I would then figure it out from there because I just didn't know. But what an experience
I bet
RTC was in terms of leadership and then also the Navy was. And we can talk about that when you're ready.
Yeah. Fun fact, I was recruited by Navy intelligence after I finished my master's in conflict analysis, but I was going to age out. So they were like, oh yeah, you're too old, by the way, after like 3 months of deep diving into my background. I would have probably been court-martialed if that's the thing, because I can't stop talking. They were like, get her out of here. But it was interesting and it was flattering, at some point. So UVA I know very well because I remember as a young person, my brother went to University of Virginia and all his college friends and everyone who's listening to this from UVA, shout out to all of you. I remember as a little one going to, my family driving up to UVA because we lived in Maryland at the time, Montgomery County, and we would take those road trips to go visit my brother at UVA and fun, fun, fun. And so I know Charlottesville very well. I have many memories. As he was getting older, so was I. So I was like, at one point, can I stay over? Yes, I got to stay over with my bro and do a little partying at Charlottesville. So that said, so now you're in RTC, you're on your way to the military, you're in college, and you're still straight and narrow. You're not going to those parties because I know what partying looks like at UVA.
Yeah.
So tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I really was very straight and narrow. I think part of that was I didn't really drink alcohol. And so, that's like there aren't many people at UVA that don't drink alcohol. There are some, but I was in a sorority, I was in ROTC. So there was certainly plenty of opportunities. But I found high school, I worked hard in high school to get straight A's. When I got to UVA, I was very challenged academically. I was around really smart people.
Yep.
It was a very humbling experience. I had to work really, really hard now to just get the reading in and get the work done and stay, above water in my classes. So I'm amazed and impressed by the people who can do all the partying and get through UVA as well at the same time, because that was just not how I could get through it. It's also very busy. There were times it would be 10 p.m. at night before I would even be able to start my homework because of all the activities from ROTC and sorority and, taking photos for the newspaper or
Right.
whatever it might have been that I was involved in. So I loved parts of my experience. I will tell you this, 3 months into my ROTC time there, I was Marine Corps option. That's just how my scholarship processed me. And I'm the only woman. And I will tell you that was not going well at all. They did not want me to be a Marine Corps option, very clearly trying to haze me out of it. I was miserable. I remember calling home. You'll appreciate this story. I called home and I told my mom, I'm not going to do this ROTC thing. This is not for me. I think I'm going to be a teacher or something instead. My mom, of course, was like, okay, darling, whatever, right? And we hung up and about 30 seconds later, the phone rang again and your father would like to speak to you. So I get on the phone with my dad and he says, no.
Not an option. I was waiting for that.
I'm like, what do you mean no? He goes, yeah, you don't know up from down. You don't know anything yet. You're just trying to figure it out. We can talk about this at Christmas when you come home for break. But until then, you're not quitting anything.
Nothing. I love it. Love your dad.
Decide you want to quit and become a teacher. Alaska has a great program for teachers and you can come home and go to the Alaska Community College. And I was just like, well, So I go home that Christmas break. I have 4 weeks, I think it was 3 or 4. It was a long break. Every single day I'm crafting this argument in my head of what I'm going to say to my dad. Every single day goes by and I don't bring it up, to the point where I get on the plane and I'm now flying back to Charlottesville and I'm sobbing because I have never discussed it with my father. What do I do? So I went in and talked to the commanding officer and I said, sir, I would like to try out the Navy option. Now my scholarship was Marine Corps, so it's not like you can swap them out. And he said, well, Midshipman Bennett, why don't you want to be a Marine? Well, I had a lot of things I was thinking like, well, your Marines are assholes. Well, they do this, they do that. I mean, I had a lot of things in my head, but I had enough emotional intelligence to say, sir, you're either a Marine or you're not a Marine. And I'm just not a Marine.
Wow.
And he looked at me and he thought that was profound. And he said, that's as good of an answer as any, I guess. And so let's give it a try. Try out the Navy option for the next few months. If you decide you want a Navy scholarship, I can see if I can get you one. No guarantees. And that ended up being what happened. So I did get the Navy scholarship. I did enjoy the Navy experience. They were a much softer, milder, accepting group of men. And there were women in the group as well. And so I loved that experience. I mean, it's amazing to me that then from there, I ended up doing 20 years in the Navy. So
fantastic.
From to college where I was ready to pull and say, no, I don't think so. What a difference that moment meant.
Absolutely. For me, I was always into the easier, softer way. So I did go to community college and then I went to school because I was like, let me see if I even want to go to school because I was a fashion designer. You don't really need to go to college for that. But I remember when I was doing my MBA, I had a similar experience where these people are not. And those of you who went to business school with me, I'm calling you all out. You're not nice people. None of you. Anyway, I was in business school when the Haiti earthquake happened. None of these people were nice about this. All I can say is it's a very competitive environment, and I get it. Everybody wants to excel. Everybody wants to do. But, a little emotional intelligence would have been extremely helpful in 2010 when I was in business school dealing with the Haiti earthquake. The lecturers were fantastic. The students, not so fantastic. And I'm calling all of you out from Cass Business School. Anyway, that said, so welcome to the Frankly Speaking with Sandra D. So tell me, I want the listeners to put in the comments, what was your challenge? When did you have to make a decision and you stayed with it? You stayed the course, even though it was as painful could be, like the commander is talking about now. She had to make a decision and she went back. I went back to business school and I don't regret going back. What it does is, tell me if you agree with this, builds character and it makes you stronger. There's that little thing that said, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So talk to me. So what was it like going back? Did you have to regroup, refuel, and re-empower? What was it? Did you have a support system to help you understand how to better show up in your experience to be more emotionally intelligent? Because sometimes I think what happens is we bump into things because we don't have the emotional intelligence to figure out where we're not needed or when we're not needed, right? So we're just happy as happy could be. And then we get our feelings hurt, right? But had we had the emotional intelligence, we could have been more, how can I say, predictive of how to engage in that situation. Tell me, what was your transition?
So the experience was something akin to this. You go from an environment where Marines are all about physical fitness, right? And so they're running, and I'm not a runner. I was never a runner. I was struggling through the Marine Corps runs. I was a woman and I'm having to do the push-ups and the pull-ups and all of the things. I've certainly developed a lot of strength and I was a strong person, but I was not Marine strong.
Mm-hmm.
And again, no support or even attempt at support in that environment. And then I shifted to this Navy where now there is a different focus. They are interested in other skill sets. They're interested in my intelligence. They're interested in my capabilities. They're interested in my leadership. They're interested in supportive of me as a woman. And it's not all about physical fitness. I was fine in my physical fitness for the Navy, but not for Marines. And
Right.
so I did have supportive men and supportive women. And so I think I just found a comfort in this larger group. One, it was not like instead of, 30 Marine men, it was hundreds of Navy
Really?
men and women, right? So much larger audience to connect and to have bonds with. And I just felt much more at home. So I think it was just a better fit altogether for me.
Mm-hmm.
Will say that I did a lot of soul searching around, is this what I want to do? Does this make sense for me? And in the end, I just was so young. I mean, these decisions were being made as a freshman in college, right? So just don't really know anything at that point in time.
Right.
And so the challenges, I was sort of like, well, I'm up for this challenge. I can do this. And I don't have anything else I really want to do. So let's press forward and experience this. And so I really did jump to the experiences. I stepped up to the challenges and I grew as an individual in my own ability. One of the things I loved about the Navy in my 20 years is I changed jobs a lot. Every year in most cases, I would, even if I'm still at the same command and tour, many cases I would change jobs year to year and get promoted into newer, higher positions. And for, I would say 15 of those 20 years, I would think, gosh, can I do this? Can I do this? Like, I don't even understand the language, the words they're using. I'm supposed to be in charge.
Really?
And yeah. And I would think, well, I'll give it a try. I'll do my best. I'll figure it out. It was probably 15 years. Then I was finally like, you know what? Bring it on. I can do it. I can do anything you throw at me. And so I left the Navy really feeling like I could really do anything. Just throw it at me. I will learn it. I will figure it out. It's just work.
That's the resilience.
Yeah. But it did take a lot. Here I was even a senior officer and I was still having these questions of, gosh, can I do this? can I command 1,200 people? That's a lot of people. And then
Absolutely.
all sorts of amazing awards and building programs that are still in existence today to support our veterans that are coming back from overseas, and really neat things.
So, well, that's fantastic. And you're so soft spoken. I hear you soft spoken, but I bet you, audience, she is, when she's got that uniform on, G.I. Jane just unleashed, right? So I want to talk a little bit more about sort of the hierarchy and the leadership while you were in the Navy, because I know you eventually transitioned into corporate America, and that's more common, but we don't really get the intel from inside the military. So talk to us about when you went in, or when you transitioned from the Marines to the Navy, did you identify, or did someone take you under their wing and help you learn the ropes? Was it when you were assigned a buddy? How was that system? How did you figure it out?
Yeah, no, they really didn't. Even in the Navy, as I graduated from college and I was kind of growing up in the Navy, one of the problems for me was I didn't see anybody that looked like me above me. Like there was no model, there was no role model of a woman in charge that I could look towards to see how this was done. I did have my very first Navy commanding officer saw something within me and he mentored me. And he basically gave me a couple of great books and said, I want you to read these. He gave me some great opportunities, and they were really transformational for me. There was confidence. It reminds me a little bit of my father. He demonstrated a lot of confidence in me. When I was with him, I knew he was in charge of this whole base, all of these people. And yet I felt like I was the only thing on his mind. He gave me his undivided attention. And I learned a lot from that. But just my first leader,
Right.
me that feeling as this little baby ensign of feeling needed, that I was capable and that I was contributing. And
Valuable.
I really wanted to always do that with my team going forward. So it was in the first 4 years of my Navy time that I had an opportunity to lead a team. And I just thrived in that. I loved that opportunity. But I would say not the kind of mentoring that you and I would maybe hope for from a senior female or other officer, just really no one to look up and hold hands with and kind of guide me through. My dad did some of that. Like I had a pretty tough, my very first year in the Navy, pretty tough situation with really clear quid pro quo requests for sexual favors. That was really shocking and horrifying and threatening. And I called home and said, I don't even know where to begin to deal with this. And my dad
did tell your father about this.
I talked to my dad about it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. I said, what do you recommend? And he said, I recommend you talk to the guy first and tell him this is unacceptable. This must stop now. And if it doesn't, then you're going to go take it to the commanding officer. And so I was nervous as all get out to actually confront this individual, but I did. And he was his knees were shaking when I did. I expected him to completely deny it, but he did not deny it. And he apologized and he said it wouldn't happen again. So I had experienced a lot.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what rank were you at that point and what rank was he?
An 01 and he was an 03.
So you were higher than him or he was higher than you?
Yeah, I was brand new in the Navy. I was first ranking officer and he was senior to me by, probably 8 years. And he was supposed to sign my base commanding duty officer qualifications. And he basically suggested that he wouldn't sign that if I didn't have sex with him.
Really? Just come out and let's just get it on. Just get it on and you can move up. How wonderful. What a lovely chap he must have been. I have no doubt he was probably married. Was he married?
Yes. And I was.
But they never fail. There's such a stereotype of these type of men in the military. But the thing is, that's very sad. I'm sorry that did happen to you because, you would think that when this happened to you, probably, like 15, 20 years ago, think about now, it's still happening today, how it's not been disrupted and ended. It's interesting when I think about militaries, Mr. Clinton, I have to bring him up every time. He felt it was a good idea that he just ended the Haitian military. Just said, yep, you're done. Gun never exists again. Now we have gangs. But this man who has a history with women, that was the test that I was talking about when I was driving. I know I'm digressing, but the test that some of these leaders have to take before you can start telling somebody what to do, you need to look at your own house. Figure out what you're doing wrong before you start telling other people. So I bet you this man who was standing between you and your trajectory, yeah, and your goals, was a mess. And there he is saying that, no, I don't think you're fit. That's what he's saying, because he didn't think you were worthy. And the only way for you to get to where you wanted to be is to have sex, to give him favor. Quid pro quo, is that what they call it? Except this man was a sex addict, clearly. Give me his number. We can send him a few videos on, Anyway, point is the fact that the insult but I'm glad that did not affect your decision to stay in the military. So
no, and in fact, I experienced enough of it over the 20 years that each time I had to address it, sometimes it was to my direct boss.
Each time? How many times are we talking about?
I don't even know that I could count. Over 10. I mean,
over 10.
But I remember one time actually having to say to my boss, look, I'm your equal opportunity officer. It is my job to keep you from saying these kinds of things to other women. He was describing the sex that he wanted to how he would sexually satisfy me. And I was like, you cannot. So he took my photo off the wall and he wouldn't give it back. And he told the staff they had to get another one of all the various commanding. I was a commanding officer at the time. And I'm not going to say exactly where I was because I don't want to.
No, of course not.
Who it was, but all this to say, I basically sat with him and said, you cannot talk to me this way. You cannot do this to anyone. This is my job to keep you from doing this or anybody from doing this. And I fully expected that my fitness report or my evaluation would be negatively impacted by my speaking out to him. And I mean, it was sort of like me putting my whole career on the line to have some of these conversations. But I did them anyway because it was the right thing to do. It was my job. And I needed to set those boundaries and protect myself and to protect other women as well. But he did respond. Every single time they responded positively. And that surprised me. And so I got better and better and better at having the conversation. And I was, more and more empowered and emotionally intelligent of how to handle the situation in each case.
Absolutely. And my firm conviction, because I have seen so many men in my family, my father's the only one that gets a pass. My brother, Patrick, who was my mother's son, he is the most beautiful being ever. He is a great brother, a great husband, a great father. The other people lurking around my family, they don't get a pass. They are narcissistic sex addicts who, if they were in the military, they would be the men that you would deal with, because these people are predators because they have no emotional intelligence. Unfortunately, what happens with these men is the fact that they're just little boys who never grow up because they want the toy and they want it now. And emotional intelligence is about setting boundaries, knowing when to ask and when to say no, and to respect the other person's personal space, emotional space, mental space. So in professional space, but the lack of emotional intelligence will get you these type of people. It's a shame that this topic, as interesting as it is and necessary, it's not blowing up the internet. But that's because the people who control the internet, I would say, are lacking in emotional intelligence. But you've worked in tech as well. So we'll leave that for a later date. I want to get back to the incident you told me about where somebody just ran up to you and kissed you. So what does that was just tell the audience about that.
That happened so many times. That happened in the Pentagon where an admiral kissed me on the mouth. That happened in my first tour of duty in Virginia Beach at the Officers Club where an admiral kissed me on the mouth. It happened when I was a commanding officer on my own quarterdeck and one of my sailors kissed me on the mouth. And I'd be like, holy cow. So in this, perhaps the most, it's not to say that I expected stupid behavior from admirals, but they were so much older. They really didn't know what to do with women in the Navy. And I was like, whatever, you're in it.
Could they just kiss them?
I just was like, no, it just happened. It happened faster than you could do anything about it. But in this case of one of my sailors that kissed me on my quarterdeck, fully in uniform, both of us, I said, whoa, what are you doing? You cannot kiss me on the mouth. And he said, I'm just so happy to see you. And I said, well, let me introduce you to a handshake. And he goes, but I'm happier to see you than a handshake. And I go, let me introduce you to the double handshake.
He is arguing for his limitation. He is like gonna slam dunk into convincing you that he did the right thing just to show you how happy he is. Now, like, had he stripped off his clothes and said, look how happy I am. Really? Come on. Seriously?
This was shocking to me. And I said, you can't do this with other women either. Like, this is not allowed. And he's like, okay. So anyway, it was just funny.
You were his commanding officer. He stayed under your command after that kiss?
Yeah, he did. It was an educational thing. I know it sounds shocking, but this kind of thing just happened. And you just kind of talked through it and you said, don't do it again. And yeah, I mean, there were never any consequences that I can recall ever happening for any of the stuff that I experienced. But that's because I dealt with the individual and I made it clear what this should never happen again. And in every case, it didn't happen again. So it was really empowering, right? I mean, I would not say I was a victim other than of their sort of stupidity. They're just their own lack of understanding of how to deal with women in the workplace.
Just no boundaries. They had no boundaries.
They didn't even, I don't even know that they figured out how to navigate professionally with women for a long time. I think it's gotten better, but I still think there's a long way to go.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to business school. I was like one of 5 women in a class of like 50, 60 men. And what happens is, and of course, it seems like we're very different in that way, but because I was older too, I mean, this was only like what in 2010 we're looking at. But I was just shut them down. I was like, this not happening. Well, they didn't kiss me. But the point is, when they treat you in a way where it's different because you're a woman, and I would say to them, because they were scared of me because they knew I was spiritual, I would say, I can see right through you. I said, I know you're a good soul. I would freak them out. That's more scary than reporting anybody to the, any kind of administrative body. So I just see right through you. You're such a good person. You don't need to be an asshole. But anyway,
I want to share with you, Sandra, that when I was at Naval Postgraduate School getting my master's, my MBA, that was perhaps a turning point for me. That was when I got the maddest. One of the things I had never experienced, except for that first initial bout with the Marines, my entire Navy experience, I felt supported and I kind of grew up with these Navy guys. I felt accepted. We got to Naval Postgraduate School. We took our uniforms off. We had debates in class. You're right. I was in some cases one of 2 or 3 women in a class of, lots of men. But I really resented them viewing me as, well, first of all, they made very clear they didn't think women,
correct.
Navy, period. They should be barefoot, pregnant at home and I was just like, wait, what? But how are we here at this point in my career and I'm dealing with peers who don't think women should be in the Navy? Really? This is where we're today? And they didn't think women were smart. And so I had to sort of earn my stripes there. And I was dealing with, in some cases, sexist teachers who, say something intelligent and the teacher would say, wow, that from a woman, no less. And I would say, excuse me? What do you mean by that? Well, I was just paying you a compliment. I go, no, that was not. Anyway, it was just really interesting. So I had to earn my stripes at Naval Postgraduate School and prove, and kind of had to do this every single tour of duty. I think I would start off at a -10, work my way up to 0 ground in the eyes of peers and my bosses, and then finally prove myself as the top performer. And I did get number 1 ranking in each of my tours of duty. But
well done.
Became a graduate in my master's program, was an honoree of academic excellence. Got there was a particular class. It was multivariate analysis. It was a very tough math class, and it was considered the one that everybody thought was the hardest class.
Quantitative analysis. I know,
multivariate analysis, right? So, and I will say that in that class, there was a moment in time where I dissected the analysis of something that had been published for the Navy, and I found math errors in it. And I was showing the class this. And this one Marine, again, actually, was kind of like starting to take me down and criticize me. And this older Marine sort of told him to shut up and let me finish. And I finished. And then the professor actually said, she's absolutely right. And that older Marine turned to the class and he goes, there's not another one of us in this room that would have figured that out. And I sort of earned my stripes that day. And finally, they viewed me as intelligent and capable and competent. But it took, a year being sort of dismissed.
Absolutely. That feeling of being invisible, like, you don't matter. And so that's extremely important to talk about emotional intelligence. It's when you're in that leadership space and those lecturers, those professors should have recognized that they are the leaders in those settings. So I want to go back to the military. So you were completely resilient. It seemed like you made up your mind that no one, nothing, no place was going to disrupt your vision for yourself in that career. And you were very fortunate to have a very supportive family. But I want you to talk about some of those things that nothing anybody could have said to you, it took some time to sort of shake off because it seemed like you managed the sexual harassment quite well. But what kind of other challenges did you have other than just the gender bias?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I love about the Navy is that we are all about accountability and development of other people and growth opportunity, right? Leadership. We really
Mhm.
it's our DNA in the military. I think that one of the challenges that I faced was and it's a little bit like being in the spotlight because you're a woman. If you do something good, it's showing up. If you do something bad, it's showing up. I was working in environments that were very high pressure. When I was at the Navy Annex in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, well, there was a Pentagon tour with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and there was a Navy Annex tour where we were doing joint manpower. And in one day, we would have to write a presentation and a paper for the Navy's position on X. And I found myself really challenged to create really quality work really fast. I
Mhm.
want to spend a lot of time on it. And I have bosses that say, no, you got to get this done right now.
Right.
You don't have time. It's right now or it's never. So
Correct.
learning to really be judicious and fast was one of those things that you didn't have time to necessarily process or even get all the information you wanted. You had to be satisfied with what you get your hands on and go quickly. And then I'd say that there were instances where I had power struggles. And some of this was because I was a woman. And some of this was maybe just because when you're in charge, other people want power. And
Sure.
so I've had several. Anytime I was doing something really big, one example was I was a commanding officer of a base in Texas, and we were having this very large veterans celebration. And we had about 3,000 people coming onto my base. And
Mhm.
we had static displays of aircraft and of tanks and of ships. And we had actually a ship in my port. We had warehouses established. We had thousands of balloons blowing up and, going in the air. And we had congressmen visiting and we were delivering a Purple Heart. And there was just a lot of coordination.
Sure.
And I had flyovers being scheduled by the National Guard. And I got into this power struggle with the National Guard commander who was junior in rank to me, but in his view, he was going to tell me when these were going to go down. And I was facing out this flyover with that flyover because I didn't want a collision. And he was trying to put them really stacked closely. And I had nightmares of me losing command and losing
Mhm.
people because of a crash right out of the gate, right? And so I was insistent on changing it. And he basically challenged, I had, I don't know, 25 of the local area leadership of the city in the room. And he basically said, well, who made you the deciding boss on this? And I said, well, if anything goes wrong, I'm the one that'll go to prison.
Of
Like,
course.
prison. Like, this is, you can take your planes and you can pack them up and you can take them home and not be a part of this if you
Right.
like. Otherwise, you can distance from this flyover to that flyover because I'm not willing to take the risk. And, the rest of the room supported me and he was sort of shut down. And so we delivered an amazing and safe event. But those kinds of power struggles, I had to stand really firm and strong and confident, sometimes more than I actually felt, you know?
Absolutely. No, I fully understand. And so that experience I'm trying to give the audience some insights into what it was like back then, 20 something years ago. Emotional intelligence, one may think that it's gender, it's more prominent, according to what gender you are. I have met men who are extremely emotionally intelligent, and I've met women who are extremely numb and have no emotional IQ. So I want you to talk to me about, even though at the time you were working predominantly men, where you saw that it was well implemented. Because we just talked about a situation where it was not.
Right.
Talk about where it was well done. And when you felt proud to be Navy.
Yeah.
because of the leadership.
I always felt proud to be Navy, but I had a particular commanding officer who gave me a lot of reign, a lot of freedom. When I was just 4 years out of college, I had 52 people under my care. I had men, women, military, civilians. I had all types of diversity. I had finances, travel, transportation, education. I had a lot of departments, and I was trying to reinvent how we operated as a command to put the customer first. Navy isn't really all about customer service,
Right.
but I was, because we had very clear customers coming in our door, and we were taking care of people and their pay and their transportation and all these things. And this was a perfect environment for taking care of customers. So I had previously had a commanding officer who, if it wasn't their idea, it wasn't going to happen. And the answer was no. And then I got the new commanding officer, who I'm still in touch with today, who was very supportive, came, talked to me, supported the approach that I wanted to do, even if it was a little risky for her or for her team, because I was breaking some previous barriers and putting personnel men next to dispersing officers and having them do the entire job, which was unheard of before, and ended up getting examined by the inspector general. And they said it was like the model of how all of them should be in the Navy. But it was really that support, not just emotional support, but professional support. And I felt like I could talk with her. I felt like she'd listen. I didn't feel like she was a pushover by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt like she had a strong awareness. She demonstrated strong interpersonal relationship skills. She demonstrated empathy. She demonstrated intelligence. And she gave me something I'll never forget, was that freedom to maneuver and do new things that could have failed. And I remembered that and took that with me going forward, so that when I was in charge, I would let people, I would think I have the way to do this and this is the way it should be.
Right.
But I would say, this is the goal. Do it the way you want to do it.
Right.
If you have any questions, I'll be happy to provide you some guidance on what I think might help, but do it the way you want to do it. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. And I'd watch them start and I would think, oh, that is not going to work very well. But they would course correct. They would start down that path. They would realize that wasn't working. They would course correct and they would start going down the proper, and then they'd end up at the goal. And in the end, because I let them go experiment and figure it out and course correct and achieve the goal, that was their win. One, they learned, they did it, and they accomplished it. It wasn't me telling them what to do and then them doing it. So that was, I think, a very smart lesson that I carried with me forever. Is that answer your question? Is that kind of what you were
That is the answer. It's just a positive experience based on observing just someone implementing emotional intelligence. Because, emotional intelligence is very vague. It's a concept that's very vague, wouldn't you say? Because you can't really put in a box and put a label on it. It shows up different ways in different ones. I mean, if you are commanding and on a base in the United States versus commanding somewhere in Afghanistan when you're under threat, and, emotional intelligence is going to be very different. And also it varies according to culture, because I had to adjust. And I don't think we talked about whether or not you were ever deployed, but I had to adjust to the culture in the United Kingdom, where people don't necessarily communicate openly about their emotions. So what I was, translating as being not acceptable was to the culture completely acceptable, because you don't share openly. I will give you an example, because when a lecturer was talking about he was experiencing cancer and in front of the class, and I was like, I'm so sorry. How do you feel? People were like, no, 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 no. They were all looking at me, and I was like, what did I say? American wanting to give you a hug, not acceptable. We were just there. He said what he said. Let's move on. That was the British in business class. But in the US, it would have been different. So tell me, did you experience different scenarios? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really would love to dovetail a little bit on your story and share one of the additional opportunities that I had with another very supportive commanding officer this was sort of my final commanding officer tour. This was when I was in charge of 1,200 people. But what I was noticing was the people that were going overseas and deploying and coming back were coming back. I mean, there's no other way to say it other than broken. They were not reintegrating very well. Their families were suffering. They were suffering. And I think that I had an ability to see that suffering, one, because of my emotional intelligence and my ability to be empathetic and to really ask the questions and pay attention to, they're military. They're not going to gush hurt.
Right.
They're not going to gush.
Like the British.
They're really right. They're going to be very stoic about it. So you really have to look for some signs. And I did notice these things. And so it was in that moment that I helped I stood in front of about 400 of my team and said, I'd like to build a program that does a better job of supporting you and your family and loved ones when you return from your year being away. And I don't know what that needs to look like. You know what that needs to look like.
Absolutely.
If you're interested in working with me to build this, please come see me. It will be in our off time. This is not going to be our day job, but this will be something that we can work together. And I got a lot of volunteers, and we spent a year. First, we initially went looking for a curriculum, and we went looking for a program that we could just pick up and develop and drop. And there wasn't one, because one of the unique things that was happening to our Navy sailors is they were being deployed as individuals, not as entire groups and squadrons and commands. And so they were alone. So they were alone going over, alone coming back, alone in their processing, and thought that they were very unique in their experience. And so we built what's called the Returning Warrior Weekend program. And we pulled the first one, I think, had 140 of the Navy people and their spouses. Actually, we had Marines as well. And we brought in speakers, keynote speakers that talked about things like the transition from warrior to civilian, the transitions that have gone on since the Greek and Trojan timeframe. We talked about PTSD. What is that? We talked about one of the biggest issues between the spouses was immediately upon returning, they would say, I want to go back. Well, that spouse has just held the home front for a year, kids, job, money, and you're just back like a week or two, and you're already talking about wanting to go back on another deployment for a year. This was crushing to the souls of these spouses, and they did not understand it. And so when we got them all in a space and we're facilitating a small group discussion, and every single military member in the room is saying they want to go back, they realized this is not about me. This is not personal to my situation. We got people to write love letters to their spouses. We had literally a reconnecting workshop. We had all of the supporting groups from the VA to the veterans, VFWs, and the trike, all of those people, and the kind of in the wings providing support. I had counselors, therapists. We did EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing. We had chaplains. We had nurses. We had a whole safety net of people, because I fully expected that there would be triggering of traumas as we opened up and started talking about some of these things. But that is a program that I initially created for my command with the intention of spreading it, right? It was basically, I knew that this was needed everywhere. We were not doing anything better than Vietnam. We were not even saying thank you. We were not even saying thank you. There was not even a certificate saying thank you for picking up and deploying for a year away from your family, in some cases making less pay and doing, and we didn't think spouses either. So we did a lot of these wonderful things. And I will tell you at the end of one of them.
This is a private organization, not and within the military. Unacceptable. This is Haitian style. My father went back after all that service abroad, not again a thank you. From the United States government, yes, but not from the Haitian military. But go on.
Yeah. So this is Navy. And this basically, I had a salty Navy chief who had tears in his eyes. And he said, I want to hug you and I want to thank you, because this weekend saved my marriage. I've had letters that said this weekend saved my life. And we measured before, during, and after 3 months, was this beneficial? And 100% of people recommended it for others and said it was beneficial.
Absolutely.
We had data. So we had subjective comments, and then we showed up the command, like, this is something you need to do. So we ended up being asked to share it throughout. My boss said, Darlene, I want you to take it across the Southwest. And I said, oh gosh, okay, let's do it. So that was a whole different thing. Let's take what we built and let's be able to now duplicate it. That's a big challenge, but we did that. It ended up going nationally, and it ended up going to other services. And late 21 years later, it is a program that's still in existence today.
That is fantastic. I applaud you for that, and I applaud the people who helped put this together. But I still don't think that's enough. I think I'm disgusted by the idea that someone serves in that capacity and they don't get the recognition nor the needs. And I say, let's take inventory of where the money is really going, because there's so much money being deployed with these wars. But then when these people come home, it's like they become invisible. I find that unacceptable, because I've seen what happens to the person when they come back home, the depression after serving in such high. My father, including Haitian military has just been completely outcast. But the idea that you don't actually see the sacrifice that the person makes, and you don't think that it impacts you in some way, shape, or form at home, because you get to go to Walgreens, and I think about there's a bomb and the Walgreens, because these people are keeping them from coming in across the border. I don't know if that's still, what's still keeping them out, because the border is wide open. That's another conversation for another day. But that said, when I see how these people come home so broken, that's so wonderful. And I share some stats about the number of suicides daily of soldiers now. How many soldiers are dying? Committing suicide, these committed depression, anxiety, suicide. What is that? Is that 20 per day? It was that high.
Close to 20 per day. And I think the last time I looked at a stat, it was like 17 per day by suicide. And
by suicide, that's the concern.
I imagine that is very underreported, actually, because
absolutely,
not everybody actually will admit to that, or it will be called that. My son, who came back from Marines and serving overseas, came back and he had 75% of his Marine fellows that came back with him had committed suicide after.
Whoa!
75%. 75%. I mean, it's really tragic. And
it's beyond tragic. So I've got a message for those people in the Pentagon who are strategizing, thinking about sending boots on the ground in Ukraine, Israel, Iran. You need to go first. Yeah, I think you should go first. What's that man's name? Austin? Go first. Go first. Stay a while, and then bring the troops. That's the way it should go. Because you make a decision that's impacting not just the person you're sending, but their immediate family and the community at large. Because that person comes home traumatized. Who knows how they're going to be in their community?
Well, not just in their community, in the legacy of how they raise their children, whether they stays together. I mean, the disruption is so long-lived, and in some cases, really hard to heal from without proper support and intervention. And the one thing that I loved about our program is that people wanted to go, they were proud to go, they loved the experience, so it didn't have a stink of mental health stuff.
Right.
And we normalized, look, all of you, it is normal to experience this. You can't go into this environment, do these things, and come back. And if you're a human being, not have heartache and distress and trauma from what you saw. And you do need to talk about it. I mean, part of the biggest thing we learned in all the reading that we did in building the curriculum was it takes talking. It takes,
of course,
you take some tools. It takes, EMDR was huge for me. I probably
fantastic tool.
Would not have known about it or even been able to identify the injuries of my people had I not gone through my own injury and my own, stress management life, learning
dark night of the soul, they call it.
How to tone the vasovagal, how to do the breathing, how to do EMDR, how to do talk therapy, all of the things, and being very understanding that didn't make me broken. There's probably no one that goes through life, all of life, without experiencing some kind of injury that they could use some help with. And
absolutely.
So it really, I love that. I'm probably more proud of that than anything I've ever done in my life was that program. And I love that my bosses gave me the latitude to build it from scratch, to create with a team, to roll it out with no guarantees of anything. That amount of rope that they give me was impressive.
So that's fantastic. I mean, I can relate to that. My father was deployed to the United States of America. I was deployed to the United States of America. The trauma that came from that. I mean, I was in a nurturing family unit, 2 siblings, my dad, my mom. My father became a diplomat when I was 3 years old. So imagine that. So I didn't come to the US until I was 11, thrown into a culture. I didn't speak the language. I did not speak English when I came. And I was like, I'm going to learn this language. But, something deep inside, I don't remember actually saying those words, but thrown into a system, no idea, no support, Walter Reed was there, of course. We had access to Walter Reed, but nothing else. Nobody was saying, well, let's help her acculturate. None of that. And I can imagine the toll on me just coming, being, and my father was constantly traveling. My mother was, the gatekeeper. But no one helped her. No one helped us. No one helped my dad. And when I came, after I started being in recovery, this is from this, and the trauma, I say, Haiti is responsible for all the trauma I have. No one helped us reintegrate into normal life. You're a diplomat. I was a diplomat for like almost 20 years. And then you're like, have to learn how to respect the rules. Oh, really? But anyway, so there's a different type of integration and there's a different type of trauma that comes with it. And I can relate. Of course, you might say, oh my God, living a diplomatic life and being deployed as a soldier, what's the correlation there? Correlation is you're taken out of your comfort zone and you're placed into another environment and you have to fend for yourself, whether it's with a gun or with a Gucci bag, So, I mean, I'm making light of it, but it's still, I think Gucci was my armor. But on a serious note, reintegration into your normal environment, I remember having to go back to Haiti, which was supposed to be home, and having to be normal citizen. First of all, they rejected the military and you were nothing. So after the red carpet was rolled out for you, when you're in uniform, when you're deployed. So I'm making that correlation between these two paths. So my heart goes out to these soldiers, and I think from their service, and to my point earlier, nor my father nor my mother would ever thank for all their service. And it's appalling that people think serving is free. First of all, the pay sucks. The pay absolutely sucks. You don't get, I mean, if you're not in high ranking office, which my father was, but the dollar now has stunk. But I want to say when these people come back home, the little bit that they're surviving on, they're still going to get food stamps. They're still going to get like loans at the bank. They still can't afford to buy a house. And so that should not be. I'm just appalled at all of that. I know this is not, I guess I have too much empathy. So I want to get back on the topic of empathy. Was it hard for you to detach? Because it seems like me, you're a very empathetic person, to sort of tone down the empathy when you want to just adopt a soldier and bring them home every day because you see they're having such a bad time.
Actually, Sandra, I will share with you one of the issues that we had for all of our instructors and facilitators was secondary trauma. We had to watch out for secondary trauma. Yeah. And what I found was after, 2 or 3 years of doing this program, when I finally retired from the Navy, there were a lot of people saying, please stay and continue to do this. And we could use your expertise as a civilian. And I was like, no, I can't. My heart can't take it anymore. Mm-hmm. I can't sit through more of this where I'm hearing the heartache,
right,
pain, and the issues that are just breaking me apart. I have the utmost respect for counselors and therapists.
Absolutely.
Really they learn how to button up and protect themselves, but I had never learned that.
No,
so
neither me.
I was taking all of this in, and it was hurting my heart. And so
Absolutely.
when I left, and it was hard because I had built this is my baby, right?
Right.
It was hard to sort of walk away and hand it to somebody else and say, please take care of it. Obviously they have, but I haven't really looked to see there was recently a funeral of one of the Navy chiefs who helped establish the program and stayed involved in the program. And we all, like a ton of us that built the program 20 something years ago, at the funeral. And I got the person who's running it now sent me a program of what it looks like today. And it is very similar to how we built it on the very first one. It gave me goosebumps and tears all at the same time to see the consistency. But at the time, that empathy was no longer healthy for me. So I had to
Absolutely.
away.
Because you have to command yourself to the point I made earlier. Command your first. And then after you've built your foundation, then from that cup that is full, you can give. But if you're an empty vessel, which I was most the majority of my, early adulthood, and I was just like giving, and I'm an empath, and I'm just giving, and you end up crashing. And which is why, to our point about narcissism, why narcissists love me. They love me. They're like, oh, I'm for you. And I'm like, yes, you are. And then I was like, oh, no, you're not. Get thee behind me, Satan. Because we attract them when we have too much empathy. So let's wrap up with knowing when that fine line is. Emotional intelligence versus having too much empathy and you're giving from an empty cup. What advice do you have for new leaders, potential leaders, and current leaders? So, what advice do you have for up and coming leaders?
It is really important that you take care of yourself first. It's this very famous put your own oxygen mask on first. So it comes to me now, part of my leadership currently is leadership of my household, my husband with early Alzheimer's, and the care providing role that I have. I learned way back as a mom, actually, and a naval officer, that if I did not take care of myself, I couldn't be a good mom, I couldn't be a good commanding officer, I could not take care of my team. And so I learned a lot of coping mechanisms, stress management mechanisms, and I am still implementing those today. Breathing, meditation, exercise, nutrition, sleep, water, electrolytes, you name it. Like, you have to take care of yourself. And then also fun.
Fun.
In intentional joy for me right now in the midst of grief, because my husband is dying of Alzheimer's. He's 68 years old. He's too young, right? But at the same time, I can't go down with the ship. I
Right.
have to intentionally create and build joy in the midst of grief. Nobody's going to live a life that doesn't do a lot of this. And so through all of this, we have to take care of ourselves so that we can be the best care provider, mom, commanding officer, boss. It doesn't matter what you are. You have to take care of yourself in order to do that and grow along the way. Keep reading, keep learning, keep those things fresh. It may be something you've read, restated a million times in different books, but rereading it keeps it fresh, reminds you how to be a good leader and how to have emotional intelligence, and keeps it at forefront. So I think we have to continue to grow. We demonstrate discipline in taking care of ourselves and in our growth. And I would just say you're a leader first to yourself.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Without a doubt. On that note, I want to say thank you, Commander Darlene Greene. And so thank you so much. This on the topic of fun. This has been fun. For me, this is fun. I love to talk, and that was one of my things with my father. He was not a talker. I was a talker. And I was like, you're going to talk to me. You're going to talk to me. My mother was like, your dad's tired. But I found my medium, my outlet. I want to say thank you for joining me on an episode of Correctly Speaking. I want you, the audience, to tell us what exactly you loved about this episode, what you would love that we had emphasized on a little bit more. Of course, this is not the last time that you see Commander Greene. Darlene Greene is, eager to speak to you. So also share the tools and practices that you find have helped you stay more focused, more balanced, more resilient when you have challenges, and how you're learning to implement emotional intelligence in your everyday life at home and in the workplace, or every day, or in the car. When somebody cuts you off, and that's emotional intelligence, when you know that. Picking your battle. How do you pick your battle? When do you do deep breathing like I do? Or do you just, I don't know, count to 5? But give us some ideas on how we can be better humans on the planet, because as long as we are coexisting, we're going to have to be more intelligent about our emotions. And the emotion is intelligence that we're trying to manage. It's not other people's emotion intelligence. We're trying to figure out our own emotional intelligence. Like I said in the beginning, it's more about when and where it's appropriate to behave a certain way, when it's time to give that person a hug or somebody to shake their hands instead of kissing them on the mouth, right? Soldiers, no kissing, okay? Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Of course, I can't stop talking. I love talking to you. And I have a really great project that I am working on that's going to be revealed soon. So stay tuned. I am full of surprises. So, Commander Greene, how can they reach you?
So my website is iamreverseaging.com, and they can also connect with me on Facebook, Darlene Bennett Greene, or on LinkedIn, Darlene Bennett Greene. I would love to connect with your audience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Of course, this has been a delightful episode of Frankly Speaking with Sandra D. My theme for life is raising my emotional intelligence. And thank you for doing that for myself and the audience. And that's a wrap. Have a good day, everyone. Oh, and don't forget, subscribe to Frankly Speaking with Sandra D's podcast and join us every week as we uncover the stories of those who triumphed over life-altering challenges to achieve not just financial success, but a richer, a deeper, a more altruistic life. It's about time we redefine what it means to be a truly affluent individual. Don't you agree? So come and join me. And let's be unstoppable on this journey called life. Because here, affluence isn't just a buzzword. It's a path to waking up to your authentic being.